All right, let's step right into the harsh, completely unforgiving world of the Coen Brothers' 2010 masterpiece, True Grit. In this explainer, we're going to look at this not just as a classic Western, but as a deeply atmospheric, slow-burn tragedy. We are really going to immerse ourselves in the relentless pursuit, the intense psychological tension, and the harrowing emotional cost of violence in the fading American frontier. Just listen to these haunting words from 14-year-old Mattie Ross. You pay for everything in this world one way or another. There is nothing free except the grace of God. Wow. That single statement acts kind of like a dark splash panel in a graphic novel, doesn't it? It perfectly establishes the bleak, incredibly transactional reality of the 1878 American frontier. Out here, well, everything has a price. And as we're going to see, that price is usually paid in blood and pieces of your own soul. Moving on to Section 1, the price of blood. So, our journey begins with a really senseless, pathetic crime. Mattie's father wasn't killed in some epic, honorable duel at high noon. No, he was murdered by a cowardly hired hand named Tom Chaney over literally just 2 measly gold pieces. It's an agonizing, completely unglamorous crime that instantly grounds this whole story in a very harsh reality. Right after this tragedy, Mattie steps up in a way that is honestly chillingly mature. She completely strips away any of that standard Hollywood innocence. I mean, when she arrives in Fort Smith to collect her father's body, she flat out ignores the undertaker's sentimental advice to kiss the corpse one last time. Instead, she gets right down to business. She ruthlessly negotiates with Colonel Stonehill to sell back her father's ponies, ultimately raising $320. She entirely ignores sentimentality so she can fully fund her vengeance. And from that hard-earned cash, she pulls out exactly $50. That's the exact price to hire the absolute most lethal U.S. Marshal she can find. In doing so, she steps fully into this dark, incredibly dangerous world of blood debts, basically tying her fate to men who deal in death. Which brings us to Section 2, a fractured trinity. This is where we hit the real emotional core of this manhunt. Just a massive clash of egos. We get this trio bound by a shared sense of isolation rather than, actual friendship. Now, the myth of the Western hero usually tells us they're clean, righteous, and noble, right? Well, Mattie's reality is Rooster Cogburn. He's aging, overweight, perpetually drunk, and totally ruthless. He's washed up, abrasive, and brags about his lethal exploits, which completely shatters that traditional archetype. And just to complicate matters even more, enter LeBeau. He is this vain, arrogant, and easily offended Texas Ranger. Yet, underneath all that bluster, he's actually highly skilled and fundamentally honorable. He's been tracking their target, Chaney, for months because of a state senator's murder down in Texas. And this creates a deeply tense frenemy dynamic with Cogburn, heavily complicating Mattie's pure quest for Arkansas justice. So together, the three of them form this fractured, highly volatile alliance. Let's head into Section 3, the unforgiving trail. As they ride out into the Choctaw Territory, you notice the barren forests, the dusted snow, and these washed-out skies that completely strip away any romanticism from the wilderness. Suddenly, Cogburn and Mattie stumble upon 2 wanted outlaws, Quincy and Moon, and it ends in a sudden, completely unglamorous explosion of violence that leaves both outlaws dead in the dirt in literally a matter of seconds. It really shows us that violence out here is messy, it's cowardly, and it is completely devoid of any glory. The psychological tension just becomes absolutely suffocating. And their grand hunt? Well, it quickly falls apart in a huge cascade of friction and failure. LeBeau basically blunders into a camp and completely ruins a carefully laid ambush. Then, in the ensuing chaos, Cogburn accidentally wings LeBeau in the arm. To make matters worse, their target's boss, the outlaw Ned Pepper, manages to escape. It's just human error, drunkenness, and clashing egos causing the mission to collapse entirely. After days of fruitless searching, the trail totally goes cold, leaving a really disillusioned Cogburn to simply abandon the hunt. Moving on to Section 4, the recoil of vengeance. Just when all seems completely lost, Mattie goes to fetch water from a stream and accidentally stumbles right upon Tom Chaney. But wait, before the gunfire erupts, we really have to pause and ask, what is the true cost of justice? We've got to force ourselves to brace for the heavy physical and spiritual toll these characters are about to pay. Because this isn't just about winning a gunfight. It's about what you lose when you finally cross that line. The climax unfolds in this rapid-fire escalation where life and death are decided in mere seconds. First, Cogburn executes an absolutely incredible 1 versus 4 horseback charge, literally taking the reins in his teeth and riding head-on in an act of sheer heroic desperation. Then, LaBeouf makes good on his previous boasts with a spectacular 400-yard sniper shot to save Cogburn's life. This frantic battle finally culminates in Mattie pulling the trigger to kill Cheney before immediately suffering a terrifying fall backward right into a venomous snake pit. Think about the literal definition of recoil for a second, right? The backward momentum of a gun when it's fired. Symbolically, it is the devastating emotional blowback of taking a human life. When Mattie shoots Cheney, that literal recoil from the heavy revolver blasts her backward into that deep pit filled with rattlesnakes. It brilliantly and tragically symbolizes the inescapable blowback of vengeance. She gets her revenge, sure, but the abyss literally swallows her whole. Now for Section 5, the Midnight Ride. Here we reach the emotional pinnacle of the entire story. Rooster's desperate, redeeming ride to save the child he inadvertently failed to protect. Knowing that the snake venom is acting fast, Cogburn rides Mattie's pony, Little Blackie, to the absolute point of exhaustion until the poor animal literally collapses and dies. He shoots the pony out of mercy, scoops Mattie up, and just carries her on foot across the vast prairie under the moonlight. Driven by pure, agonizing urgency and accompanied by a haunting 19th century hymn score, this superhuman effort perfectly defines the true grit of a completely broken man trying to do one truly good thing. And finally, Section 6, Time Escapes Us All. The story then suddenly jumps forward 25 years to 1903. Leaving the visceral violence behind, we find out that Mattie is now 40 years old, unmarried, and running her family farm with an amputated left arm. She receives an invitation to see Cogburn, but tragically he dies 3 days before she can reunite with him. We learn he had been reduced to performing as a novelty in cheap Wild West shows, and Mattie notes she never sees LaBeouf again. The incredibly harsh realization here is that Mattie traded a piece of her own body and a lifetime of emotional solitude for her revenge. Meanwhile, the frontier heroes just faded into total obscurity, which leads right to Mattie's final, incredibly melancholic reflection: time just gets away from us. This simple, heartbreaking sentence really seals the true tragedy of the story. The Wild West, its ruthless outlaws, the courts replacing frontier justice, and our own youth, well, they're inevitably all washed away by time. This uncompromising cinematic vision built a seriously incredible legacy. It grossed over $252 million globally and earned 10 Academy Award nominations. Also, a fun fact, the film was scripted entirely without modern dialogue contractions to preserve its highly formal 19th century feel. And as a really wild piece of pop culture trivia, it was actually the final DVD ever mailed by Netflix in 2023. Crazy, right? It's a massive commercial and critical triumph that stands as a uniquely formal and emotionally devastating achievement. I'll leave you with this final thought today. If revenge inevitably costs us pieces of ourselves, is the bloody debt of justice ever truly settled? As you reflect on Mattie's tragic descent and the brutal, unglamorous reality of the American frontier, let that question linger. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it sparks your curiosity to look a little deeper into the stories we love.